the numbers start to roll in, right? Good. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure many of you, we have had webinars already this last week, but with you, but I think this is a great one because we have Senator John Cornyn with us, as well as the SBA representative who, as we are kind of now coming through this incredible work that was done in Washington on behalf of our industry, we're now actually moving into execution mode. And so we thought this would be an appropriate time to hear from Senator Cornyn, and also to maybe talk a little bit about what your questions are, but also a little bit of an insight from him on, you know, the dust has not settled. We are going to talk about executing $2.2 trillion, how that comes out, and then also maybe what's ahead for our sector, because the one thing we can all agree on is that at this point, it's really catastrophic what's happened across Texas to our industry. And so I just want to take a moment because it's really an honor to have the senator with us. Many of you know him because he has been, was just reelected in 2014, overwhelmingly again, into the U.S. Senate for his third term. Senator Cornyn is a San Antonio native. He strongly believes that we need more Texas solutions in Washington. I think we can all agree with that. He is constantly fighting to bring the Lone Star's no-nonsense, common-sense solutions to federal level, and I think we can see that play out here. Senator Cornyn serves on the Senate Finance Committee, the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees, where he helps craft legislation on behalf of 28 million Texans. And so we've got a great representative for us in Washington. I'm now honored to invite Senator Cornyn to make some comments about our industry, about the CARES Act, and then I've got a number of questions for him that we'll run through today as well. So Senator, on behalf of our entire membership, we thank you for being here, and I welcome you to make some introductory comments.
Well, thank you, Emily, and thanks for organizing this call so we can provide your membership restaurants across the state in the midst of this coronavirus crisis. It was less than a month ago when I got to see a number of you at the fly-in, but it feels like a lifetime has passed between then and now. This virus has spread across all 50 states and with incredible speed, and it's not done yet. And I know that this is a difficult time for all of you, not only as business owners, but as parents and neighbors and friends. And I know that the people you employ, who unfortunately many of you have had to lay off, that's caused you a great deal of personal pain and anguish. And that's something that we need to try to help you get through. In response to this crisis, Congress has provided 3 bills to bolster resources, first to our healthcare providers and support workers and businesses who've been impacted by the economic fallout. Really, this crisis has two main points. One is obviously the healthcare crisis, but the other is the economic crisis caused by the public health response. So let me just walk you through some of the main provisions of the CARES Act, which was signed by the President on Friday. We've done our very best to get to the heart of the crisis and provide first serious resources, $100 billion to hospitals that are being crushed by the weight of this workload. They can no longer do elective surgery, so that means many of them are, in order to prepare for a potential surge of new patients who will require care as a result of the COVID-19, they are foregoing some of their ordinary income, and they are, as like I said, preparing those beds now empty, and hopefully they will not all be filled. But we also, part of that $100 billion will provide additional support for things like telemedicine. When I talked to Governor Abbott about this shortly after the crisis began, he said we need 2 things from Washington. We need testing, and we need PPE, which we've all come to learn as personal protective equipment. And so that's designed to keep both the healthcare providers safe so they can continue to provide care, but also our first responders. This legislation provides $16 billion to provide the availability of those resources. We've also tried our best to cut red tape and speed up the process of making vaccines, as well as instituting clinical trials to take medications that are already widely available for other purposes and see if they might work against this virus. Medical professionals have at every level have encouraged us to do some basic stuff, which you all have heard this many times, and these are the same things our mother taught us growing up. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, and maintain social distancing, which I point out to some people in Texas is not a problem, depending on where you come from, because in some places we have more cows than people. But in all seriousness, these are some pretty basic things that all of us have now incorporated into our lives, and I think it will help us bend the curve that we've talked so much about. But in the meantime, schools are closed. I know if you're a parent of school-age kids that you're in essence having to homeschool them while you're trying to do your job as well. We know travel plans have canceled, people are losing jobs and paychecks, and everybody's hunkering down. And of course, it's the uncertainty that I think is causing so much anxiety. But we are doing everything we can and that we know how to do. We've taken our first big step to provide stability for American families and our economy in this uncertainty. First of all, we know that many of the folks who work in your restaurants, who work for wages or tips or some combination, when they're out of work, they're not getting a paycheck. And so one of the things we want to do is get money in their hands as soon as possible. And this is really extraordinary. I mean, these are things I would not ordinarily be voting for except for the emergency, but we have agreed to send in the next 2 weeks, hopefully, directly to bank accounts maintained by people who filed their 2019 taxes, a check for up to $3,400 for a family of 4 with a household income of $150,000. This is really a cash lifeline to get us over into the next level of assistance, which is unemployment insurance. We've expanded unemployment insurance eligibility and provided an extra $600 a week in federal unemployment benefits on top of what the state is giving. And that will be good for 4 months. And the extended unemployment benefit will go through the end of the year. That'll be 13 additional weeks. But we want to make sure you have the money that you need to cover your rent, pay your bills, and hopefully maintain as many of your employees as you can when the smoke clears. Because we want to make sure that once we defeat the virus, which we will, that the jobs that you create will be waiting there, or at least rebuilt after this storm passes. So we know that for your small businesses, it's not possible to go weeks or months without income because the bills never seem to end. And I know today is the first day of the month and it's rent day for many businesses, many people. The Texas Restaurant Association tells me that as many as 12% of Texas restaurants anticipate permanently closing within the next 30 days. And I know the restaurant business is a tough business anyway, but this just makes things a lot harder. So what we have done to help the smaller businesses is to establish something called paycheck protection. And this is done through SBA certified lenders, and you're going to hear from Elsie and others about that in a moment. But in order to make this easy, this isn't going to be handled in the traditional small business association manner. What it's going to be done is through existing lenders in your community, SBA certified lenders, and they're going to be able to provide low interest loans. I think the Treasury said at 0.5% interest rate, but you'll wait until the end of my comments here and you'll see that even that is not the real cost. And that can be used to cover everything from payroll to supply chain disruptions to rent. And if you choose to maintain your payroll until June, payroll, rent, and utility payments covered by the loan can be completely forgiven. So actually this paycheck protection provision designed to help you with the expenses that you incur over the next couple of months will be completely forgiven. The loan amount could be up to 250% of your average monthly payroll with a maximum of $10 million. And our goal is now that the SBA rules have been issued, and there's a good article that you might have seen in the Wall Street Journal today explaining this in terms that even I can understand. Friday, they'll begin taking applications. So I know getting cash in hand is a high priority, and these businesses, your businesses that have applied for these SBA loans can request an emergency cash advance of up to $10,000. So we know that challenges for restaurant owners are unique when groceries are scarce and citizens, especially senior citizens, are told to avoid gathering in large groups. We rely upon restaurants. That's why we've waived existing Small Business Administration affiliation rules for restaurants and restaurant chains, ensuring you can, to the extent humanly possible, keep your doors open and keep people fed. And for those who don't have access to the SBA loans created by this legislation, there's also another alternative or another provision. It offers a temporary refundable employer retention credit for businesses to continue to pay your employees despite shutting down or losing a significant amount of income. In the short term, these loans are going to be critical to staying afloat, but we wanted to provide some longer term stability. One item we've been talking about since tax reform, and I recall distinctly my conversations with virtually all of you, has been qualified improvement property, the QIP provision, which was messed up due to a drafting error during the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Fortunately, we were able to right that wrong and retroactively restore QIP's 15-year cost recovery so it can qualify for 100% bonus depreciation. And while this may not have a huge impact right now, I know this is going to provide some relief and peace of mind once we resume some sense of normalcy. On top of this permanent change in the tax code, we made a temporary one, which increases the amount of interest expense that you can deduct in 2019 and 2020 from 30% to 50% of taxable income. Hopefully this will help increase liquidity with a reduced cost of capital, so you'll be able to continue operations, again, to the extent humanly possible, and keep employees on payroll and connected with your business. We're hoping to minimize the disruption this will have for businesses that we know that you will work so hard to build over so many years. We don't need more bureaucracy. You need a lifeline, and I'm hopeful that's what this legislation provides. So I know words don't offer a whole lot of comfort during these trying times, but I want to assure you that I've listened to the challenges that you have presented to me, and that we are doing the very best we can to keep fighting to help you. Now, nobody expects this legislation to operate exactly the way Congress intended. You don't pass a $2 trillion bill at warp speed and not have mistakes or glitches and not have gaps. And so what I need to do is continue to hear back from you about other needs that you have and other concerns, not even in spite of the fact we've now passed these 3 pieces of legislation. So we've been in touch with many of you about the process to apply for assistance through the SBA, and I know you'll hear more from Herb and Elsie from the SBA's DFW district office, and I appreciate them joining the call. So I encourage all of you to reach out to my office if we can help. My staff will be staying on the call to hear your concerns so we can follow up on those. But again, thank you for the opportunity to join you on this call. And Emily, I'm happy to take or dodge a couple of questions. And so let me turn it back over to you.
Yeah, you bet. And so I've got, first I want to say, and you mentioned this, that we had just brought a number of folks up to Washington and had an opportunity to meet with you. And one of the things that's very clear, I stepped into this role just in August, and you have been just a staunch supporter for the history of your time serving of our industry. So I just want to say thank you, because as I look at what came out, it was clear, even having a restaurant carve out, that when you say you're listening to the members, and we had 50,000 restaurants just 3 months ago, I want to just say thank you from all of us, because it was very clear that restaurants were at the table and you were thinking a lot about our members and their employees. And so I think the comment of that just being 3 weeks ago, almost 4 weeks ago now, we are now in an unprecedented time that I don't think we could have imagined sitting with you in DC. In your opinion, as we see some of these numbers start to increase, what can the federal government do to prevent this pandemic right now from getting worse? So that really our goal is keep people healthy, but also get our restaurants back open. And
Exactly.
so what do you see as that guidance?
Well, those are obviously connected because as we keep hearing from the public health experts, we need to bend that curve. And the good news is that so far, other than in places like Dallas, we have not seen the problems, for example, they have in New Orleans following Mardi Gras or in New York. It's pretty obvious to me that this virus loves a crowd and congested conditions, and that's why we've seen the problem greater in some of our urban areas. But we've been working closely with Mayor Johnson in Dallas, and my old friend Sylvester Turner in Houston, and all the mayors in San Antonio and all across the state to try to help them through this as well. But we we need to bend that curve, and each of us are doing what our public health officials are telling us to do, which is to wash your hands and observe the social distancing, and then also, to the extent possible, limit your contact with people outside, and when you do, maintain the distance. So that's hard to run a restaurant or go to a restaurant under those rules, but hopefully once we do bend that curve and the governor and the mayors and others begin to ease up some of these meeting criteria, that we can gradually get back to close, if not a normal, at least a new normal.
A new normal, sure. And that sort of leads to my next question, which is this idea of social distancing, which has been great to see. Most Americans are absolutely embracing this. We've had orders put in place by county and city governments, and many of the leaders you talked about here in Texas have been incredible partners because they see restaurants as the economic engine of many of their communities. Right now, we are constructed in a way across the state where we have carry out, curbside, delivery, and even drive-through. Do you support seeing restaurants remain open in that regard with those facilities?
Absolutely. The Center for Disease Control has said takeout and delivery are safe options. And in fact, they say it's safer than going to the grocery store, even though going to the grocery store is obviously essential for all of us from time to time. Yeah, I'm impressed at the way Texas restaurants have adapted so quickly. Even the governor has allowed cocktails on the go. It's a great
Which
way.
We're grateful for, right?
We probably need it given the circumstances we're in. So it's a great way for Texans to support your local restaurant, to help your neighbors stay employed, and ensure businesses will be there when this pandemic passes. And I also understand that you can purchase gift cards or cards redeemable in the future, but you can pay for them now and provide a little bit of cash to your favorite local restaurant. So I'm encouraging all Texans, if they can, to support their local restaurants.
Excellent. That's right, because we want to go out to them and celebrate when we're through this crisis for sure, and we need them to be there. As we think about the bill, right, and you said it so well, I mean, 2.2 trillion, that's tough to create and probably even harder to spend. And as we're uncovering and working with our SBA partners, no bill is perfect. Doesn't matter what legislation it is. What would you like to see in future bills? Because we know as hard as you've worked, it won't be long before you're probably back at it in mid to late April. And so as you look forward, what do you think about relief for our industry? Is there other things that you're thinking about that maybe we can give our members hope that may be coming?
Well, given that politics is my chosen profession, I will tell you that there are two approaches. One is, how do we solve the problem, and how do we address the emergency from a public health standpoint and from an economic standpoint? And then there's a second approach, which is, don't let a good emergency go to waste, and let's try to do other things that are maybe unrelated to the emergency, but that we've always wanted to do, and this provides an opportunity. So this is a time for us to pull together as a country, like we did after 9/11, after the Great Recession of 2008. And I think that's what the American people expect from us, and that's what they deserve. But there are some things being discussed, like infrastructure bills, something that we wanted to do anyway. And if there's an opportunity, if people see an opportunity for us to do that, I think that's important. But to me, the most immediate challenge is to defeat this virus and to keep our economy, including our restaurants, operating as much as possible.
Excellent, absolutely. And so as you think about our small business owners, and I think one of the things we've been hearing about, and I know your office is as well, is that these are just heartbreaking stories, right? These restaurants are the hearts of communities. They're where we've celebrated baseball championships, weddings, divorces, everything in between. And so just thinking about those small business owners across from the most remote location into our center cities that are maybe sitting idle right now, having laid off their employees that are staff, is there anything you want to say to them? Because I know we really want to help them, and the Texas Restaurant Association is absolutely committed to helping them get through this, but I'm sure they'd love some advice or guidance from you.
Well, I don't know about celebrating divorces, Emily, but
no, I'm not one of those people.
But yeah, I mean, this is a very difficult time, and it's a lot of stress, and people are at home with their children, or maybe with a loved one who needs some medical attention but isn't sick enough to go to the hospital, and not having any money coming in the doors, but to seeing the rent and the mortgage continue to come due. That's tough. But, you know, I've seen after Hurricane Harvey and after other disasters in Texas, Texans helping each other. And there's a lot of ways to help. A lot of my folks and my staff are volunteering at food banks and delivering food to seniors who are homebound and things like that. So I'm sure there are a lot of things that people can do while maintaining that social distancing. But I just want you to rest assured that I'm treating this as the emergency that I believe it is. And when President Trump talks about our nation being on a war footing, I think that describes my attitude as well. And so we'll get through this. It's going to be tough, tougher on some people than others, but I know folks in the service industry are really experiencing the brunt of the economic impact of this because of the nature of your business. But we've tried to help with these bills. And of course, we put together a document that lays out all the assistance offered to Texas restaurants, that a lot of which we've talked about here today. So we'll be glad to send it on to you and hopefully distribute that to your members. I know from some of your members who've already called me offline, personally, there's a lot of questions, and there will continue to be questions as the SBA and local banks and others implement this legislation. But don't hesitate to call, and we're happy to help.
Yeah, Senator, I can't thank you enough for taking time, which I know isn't, as you said, in war footing, and how much is on your plate right now. It means a lot, I know, to everyone. We will post this webinar. We also are going to post the materials from your office onto our COVID-19 site. And for everyone who's listening, I can tell you that the Senator's team has been remarkably responsive. And so as we're collecting data about what is working and what isn't, and we go into that next cycle potentially of additional relief to come, we will make sure that those issues that are really important to Texas, we will continue to funnel up. And the collaboration, and I think the Senator mentioned it, from the governor down to the mayors in our state, on behalf of this industry, they know this is what we need to do to stay healthy and to get through this. And they also know how painful it is. And so I just know that this is a great relationship. I didn't expect to be in this pandemic in my first 6 months of this role, but it's brought me closer to our elected officials. And for that, I'm grateful. So thank you so much again.
Thanks a lot.
You bet. Take care. We'll let you sign off.
Okay.
All right, so we are going to move into, this is Elsie's turn from SBA, and I said to someone this morning, you know, is there any more difficult job right now than being at the SBA? Because I know I'm fielding so many questions where I feel like I need to be an accountant, a tax attorney, an HR, maybe even a counselor. So first, thank you for getting on live with us today, because if you saw my office, we've got thousands of sheets of paper right now with questions. And so I know we've been able to send a bunch of questions your way. And so I'm going to kind of turn this over to you and let you hopefully have some Q&A, but we also sent a lot ahead of time. So however you'd like to proceed through this mass would be great.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for having me. And everybody, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, we sure can.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate, you know, what you're doing and what Senator Cornyn's office is doing as well in terms of the small businesses, because there are a lot of small businesses that are actually hurting, and we hear from them day in and day out. And ever since this is broke, we're at the district office here in Dallas-Fort Worth, and we cover 72 counties, but we're, you know, pretty much covering any call that kind of comes in to answer questions, because, you know, it's what we do. But we're talking to the restaurants, and we're talking to everybody, and it's a difficult situation. We've got really, really sad stories. And so we're trying to do everything in our power to kind of help and answer any questions as much as we possibly can. So a couple of things I just want to say right off the bat. Once Texas was declared with regard to the Economic Injury Disaster Program, everybody was going through the SBA website. And of course, the website at that time, as far as the portal that everybody was using to apply for assistance, could not support all of the heavy usage. So we've had a couple of changes that have turned out to be positive changes that have smoothed out things. If everybody made application or went to the website into that portal during the first week, you know, there were lag times, they couldn't get through, documents wouldn't load. And then last Wednesday, the site was down most of the day for maintenance. And when it came back up on Wednesday afternoon, I believe, there was a new, easier process on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. and it just allows them to download the application and upload it. So, and that happened, and so that was definitely easier. But then come Monday morning, new site, new process, and it's definitely smoother. It's stable, so we're not having people kicked off. You don't have long wait lines. It's a very smooth process to go through that economic injury disaster loan program. As a matter of fact, last night about 7:40, I walked a business owner through that entire process because they had questions about it, and so I was trying to do some of the follow-up calls that I had, and she goes, "Okay, this is so much better. I can get through this." And so the site, first of all, the site is up. It is better than it was before, and it's an easier process. But before I get started and answer any questions and go over my other notes, there are two sites I just want to reiterate to everybody to be aware of. And that first site is, of course, the SBA website, www.sba.
Elsie? Hey, Elsie, can you hear me? Can you hear me? You can't hear me? Did you turn on your audio? Did you dial in? You can't hear me at all? Can you dial in to the audio stuff? Okay, hold on. It looks like we're getting everybody back now. Thank you guys for bearing with us on that. Sometimes, I know we're all using Zoom a lot right now, so these things happen. Elsie, can you hear us yet? Okay, hold on. All right, I'm gonna pause and make sure that my panelists can get back in. Let's see here. Let's see here, Elsie, send. Hey everyone, thanks for staying patient. I'm trying to get Emily and Elsie back on. All right. Okay, Elsie, it looks like you're connecting you to audio right now. It's just taking another minute. Emily made it back, which is great. I don't know if she can hear me or not, but I can see her. Yeah, okay, great.
Got a
What? Oh my God. All right. Elsie still can't hear you yet. Oh wait, there she goes. Hey.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay. You were just
All
about
right.
to solve problems when we got cut off.
Okay, all right. Okay, I don't know where I was, but there were two websites. I think I was going over two websites to keep in mind. One of them was SBA.gov, and the other one was Treasury.gov. And I was indicating that on the Department of Treasury's website, they actually have listed some frequently asked questions about the Paycheck Protection Program. They've actually have the Paycheck Protection Program application form on that website, and just a fact sheet about the Small Business Paycheck Protection Program as well. And on our website, we will have all of the SBA materials, and we'll have additional information this afternoon posted on our website about the program as well. But those are there are 4 very good documents there, and so I wanted to let everybody know that, because those are a lot of the questions that we're getting this week into our office about those programs. But they are going to be on the SBA website, and there are some documents that are actually already posted on the Treasury.gov website. So I wanted to make sure everybody aware of that. The second thing is, during the week when, last week when applicants were going to the website and they were uploading those documents, if they did not get an application number for their economic injury disaster loan, they may want to go back through the portal this week and make sure that they actually get an application number. That application number is what they will actually need when they're corresponding with SBA about their loan request. When they go into the economic injury disaster loan application, they made some modifications since all of it started, where it allows them to request that $10,000 advance as part of that economic injury disaster loan program. So there's an advance where you can actually get the $10,000 advance. And my understanding is on that advance, that once that application goes in and it gets to the point of processing, that it will, they'll be able to kick that $10,000 advance in 3 to 5 days. So that's why on the last part of that application that they're doing online, it'll ask specifically for their bank account number and their routing number. So that part there is legitimate. The other thing I'd like to say is that there are a lot of different scams and everything going on out there as well, and people need to be aware of that. If it did not come from SBA.gov and they have any questions, they just need to let us know. But if they get an email or something that says that they need to send bank statements, then that is not associated with SBA. We've had quite a few of those that have come in that they are asking for their bank statements. Somehow they, but SBA is not going to ask for your bank statement. So if it's anything outside of that SBA portal, then I would question what is going on there. So one of the things here too, one of the questions that have come up a lot is the economic injury disaster loan program, and then also the paycheck protection program, which one? And each business needs to look individually at their situation and determine which one is better. For example, when they're looking at the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, that is the normal disaster program that has always been there, but we've made some modifications to it for COVID. For one thing, it is a 30-year loan. Under the under normal programs outside of COVID, it was up to 30 years. But with the COVID-19, if you apply for an economic injury disaster loan, it is a 30-year loan. There is no prepayment penalty, and the payments will not start on that loan until 12 months after the disbursement. So those are some things to take a look at, and it's a 3.75% interest rate. So right now we know that the businesses are hurting for that cash, so they need to decide what's best for them. Questions that are coming up: can I still apply for that one and apply for this one? If you've already applied for the economic injury, yes, you want to go ahead on and do that. And the payroll protection, some people feel that that's the better one for them, but they've got to make a decision when you take a look at what the terms are of that loan and the forgiveness to see what's best for them. For some of the smaller companies, like one other thing here, on that $10,000 advance that's associated with that economic injury disaster loan program, that was something that was not in place when people started applying a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. That is another feature that was added. And so if they've already applied, they may get some correspondence from SBA that says, okay, do you want to get that advance? But if they started applying this week, it's going to be automatic. There's a box to check that I'd like to have that $10,000 advance as well. And when they're applying, it actually says whether or not you are approved for that loan or not, that $10,000 associated with that would not have to be paid back, providing, it's used for the payroll and things like that. So, but looking at those programs side by side is what I think a business owner has to do to determine really what's best for them. Because you'll see that the interest rate is different and the terms are different. For example, with the payroll, it's 0.5%, I believe, 0.5%, but it's a 2-year term versus a 30-year loan. So it's going to depend on the type of business and what that payroll is and what type of expenses you have and things like that to determine really what's the best one. And also keep in mind with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, that was the first one that's out there, and a lot of people applied for that. That if it turns out you do not necessarily have to take that loan. It can be approved and you can still be deciding and say, hey, I think this other one is the best thing for me. What they will also find out too is that when they actually do the Paycheck Protection Program loan, that is the loan that is directly from the lending institutions. And on that actual application, it asks them, have you applied for an economic injury disaster loan? So they're syncing that up, so there's really not a whole lot of duplication in there. So you'll see that question on there. But if they take a look at that application, and it's even the one for the payroll protection, they've kind of really simplified it. And so that will, it's very simple, but there will be some talking in terms of, did you already apply for the SBA loan, and are you doing the Paycheck Protection Program loan as well?
And so they can do both, right? They can do both if that's.
Yes, they can do both, because there could be a situation to where this one fits, like in terms of the terms, or that one's a better one than the other, or if you got the other one, then maybe that's deducted from there. So it's really gonna depend. Okay?
Yep, that's great though, because that's been last a lot.
Yeah, and the other thing with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, when they're taking that money out relatively fast, and under normal circumstances, they would determine really what your injury was. Let's say that you had 6 months of lost profit margin or something like that, and we think you're going to get back to normal. So I think under the expedited method, they're looking at, let's say you're looking at 6 months or 4 months getting back to normal. But let's say that this situation continues, and it ends up being more than 6 months, it's 8 months. And so with the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, there's always been an opportunity to ask to be reconsidered. For example, let's say that it was determined that you were eligible for $25,000, And it turns out that really, when it lasted longer, it didn't end in June. It ended up being in August, which means there's additional funds that are needed. Then you have the opportunity to ask for an increase.
Good,
So
okay.
an increase of that loan. But but it is a 30-year term, and so, but under the expedited process here, a lot of it's going to be it's automated, and it's going to be fast. It's faster than, hey, it used to be under normal circumstances it would take 18 to 21 days to get that final decision, but it's going to be quicker than that, is my understanding, and the system that's being used, that they can generate decisions relatively fast. That there's X amount that can be done in 1 hour. So, it was a rocky start, but it's gonna smooth out here in terms of it's beginning to smooth out with regard to the intake of applications that are coming in and just the stability of the system. And then let's see. In terms of questions, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think we sent 100.
Yeah, there were a lot. So I was trying to figure out which ones to kind of, what are some of the most common ones?
Well, and maybe I'll help start you off, because I think this one has come up a lot. So we have a number of our companies may have underneath maybe a franchisee, right? They may have 2 different companies with 2 different EIN numbers, and they're asking if they both meet the threshold of that restaurant carve out, right, of 500, but no more than 500 per unit. Can they apply for both EINs, or is it just one if it's common ownership?
Okay, they're going to look at under normal circumstances, they're going to look at that ownership, and you had 2 EIN numbers, and you would have 2 separate applications. Things have changed a little bit, so they're trying to simplify it. Some of the affiliation, they've kind of simplified that a little bit too. So depending on how that setup is, like for one, we had one that had a question, and I think it was, they had 2 separate EINs.
Yep.
And they had 2 separate applications. And under normal circumstances, that application, they would have them processed by that same loan officer so that they could pull those things together. So if something changes on that, I will check on that one. And what we may end up doing is putting some frequently asked questions with regard to that on the website, but I can double check on that under the current guidelines, because some of the things have been relaxed. Things that were in place before are not in place.
Right, and that's what we were hoping, right? Okay. So sorry, it was tougher than I thought. It's just one that comes up because we have so many franchisees that may have different business units under them. Yeah. And so they can benefit if they, maybe more greatly if they are able to apply for loans under each of those EINs, if that's what's needed, because separately they do meet all the threshold requirements. So thank you for that.
No problem. Let's see. Another question. One of the questions was, as far as applying, does SBA loan apply through the SBA website, or do the business owners have to reach out to their SBA lenders? Okay, so under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, that's going to be directly on the SBA website, and that is a direct loan from SBA. If they're going with the Paycheck Protection Program, then for that program, they would reach out to their individual lenders, to their lenders. Now, there are SBA lenders that are out there, people that are already doing SBA loans, and then various institutions that are not doing SBA loans. Those lenders can actually apply to get authorization to start the Paycheck Protection Program. So we're getting literally tons of lenders and banks and credit unions that are saying, hey, I don't do SBA loans right now, but I want to do SBA loans. And so we're directing them of what they need to do. There's some expedited processing that has been put in place for those lenders. So, what we tell people is, where do you bank right now? Check and see, do they do SBA loans? Chances are they're going to be. Also, on our SBA local website, on our Dallas site here, we post all of the lenders that have made loans in the Dallas-Fort Worth district. We cover 72 counties in the last year. So you'll see, chances are, if you check that out, you'll see a lender on there. We actually, because they normally do SBA loans, I put it on there for fiscal year 2019. And we got about 177, I think, lenders that are actually located on, that are listed there, that are doing SBA loans. And it shows you really what their loan volume was normally versus in the previous year. But that list is going to grow in terms of how many lenders can do SBA loans.
That's great.
Another question or something that came up was as far as how long it takes. That's the big question in terms of when I make application, how long is it going to take? For the disbursement for the economic injury disaster loan, once it actually is approved, they're trying to kick out that $10,000 within 3 to 5 days, that first $10,000 within 3 to 5 days of it actually being approved. And it would go to the bank account that the applicant filled out when they made their application. For the paycheck protection loans, that here we've got some estimated timeframes on those. Those can be a little bit quicker. Those are going to come from the lenders. They'll be able to do it on their existing documents. And so on that, I think it says here, I don't have my glasses here. It says within, it says here within 72 hours or 36 hours once they make an application, but I'm not really sure about that. But we'll post the time frame on our website as for how long that's taken with the existing lenders.
But it's, I mean, even if it was 72, that's so much faster than what we had historically, so that's good.
It's definitely not weeks. Yeah, it's definitely not weeks. And on some of them, it's saying here that it's going to be same day, but I don't know about that one until they actually start. It says same day on the form here, but we will see on that.
We'll see. So I have another one, because I know you're trying to sort through all of these, but we are getting, and I'm sure you are, that people are starting to think about calculating payroll costs. And it's a bit of a conundrum and a numerator and denominator and how it all comes together. But really is the magic number that June 30th, right? So really that payroll measurement is by June 30th. That's sort of the landing date. It's not that if you were to close for 6 months and then decide to hire in the fall, that your covered period would be that 8 weeks. That really it's about the intent was get people back working, and the payroll year over year would be measured on that kind of June 30th date. And so we have a lot of people asking questions about 8 week from origination of the loan is my covered period, but what is this June 30th date? And does it mean I have to be back to a certain number of employees in order to have that, you know, benefit of not having to return some of that payroll cost?
I don't think that is the, let me check right here. There was something that came down on that here.
Yeah, and I know this is one, and if you don't have it, it's okay, because even lots of conversations are happening, but sort of giving people a sense of, as they plan out their businesses, you know, in the next couple of months, what are they really required to do to make sure they can have that in top of mind as they think about how much money they're going to be able to borrow and then not have to repay.
Right, because it's significant in terms of that part that's forgiven.
Correct.
So we will, there's a question and answer. Okay, here it is. All right. All right, let me see. It says how much for loan. You will owe money when your loan is due if you use the loan amount other than payroll over the 8 weeks after getting the loan. I'll double check that. I'm not really sure. So I'll make sure that we get the right date on there.
Good. Okay. And it's really just about, and I know that the intent was get people working, but a lot of our restaurants are going to be disadvantaged, right, by our sort of unemployment system now, which is great for employees, and we want to support whatever we can for employees. But if they're not, you know, if they, and restaurants are incentivized to bring people back, but employees are incentivized not to work, we kind of have these two competing things coming together. And so, you know, just something I want to make sure our restaurants are set up for, and I don't want them to think there's going to be this portion they can't, you know, that they're not going to have to repay, and then they're going to have to, because that would be a tough spot to put in.
Exactly. And the June 30th is the significance of that is when this program, that's that deadline for that program. June 30th is that date.
For the PPP program, right? They've got to have their loan in place and then 8 weeks, but everything has to be done by June 30th.
Yes, by June 30th for the paycheck protection.
Okay, good. And that's actually really important for everyone listening, because I think there's some folks that thought they could just ride this out and then maybe take the paycheck protection in the fall. And we're saying that's not an option. Everything is sort of that June 30th end date.
No, there's a longer deadline, open deadline for the economic injury disaster loan.
Correct.
That there's a longer deadline for that one, but for the payroll protection, June 30th.
Excellent. Okay, good. Anything else you have in your notes? And if not, I can go through these and just grab a couple of them as well, because I know the questions are coming in fast and furious.
No, just shoot.
So in order for them on the paycheck protection, it sounds like what we've been told is as long as they were operating by February 15th as a business, that they would qualify. So if I open my business this week, I would not be eligible for the paycheck protection, that I had to be established by the February 15th date.
Yes,
Does that sound correct?
Yes, according to the documentation that I have, February 15th. What was in place before February 15th?
Okay, good. And then the credits, so there's an employee retention credit program where 50% of that salary can come back as a tax credit. You can't participate in that and the paycheck protection program, right? Those are two different elements.
It's two different things, and so I really can't speak to that, but I think that, yeah, I can't speak to that as far as that credit.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
and then
I know that.
Go ahead, Elsie, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, but I know that some of that is on that IRS website, but I can double check that, but I can't really speak to that one.
Okay, perfect. And so looking at just some of the questions that are coming live, can we apply for both loans? That answer is yes.
Yes.
Can we apply, same question, same again, can we do both loans? Yes. And I think what Elsie was communicating to all of you was you need to look at the terms. One is 30 years, up to 30 years, right? 30-year term, and there is no penalty for prepayment. However, it's 2 years on the paycheck protection. And so really thinking about, and this is where you have to sit down, I think we've been saying this for a long time, is sit with your lender and have your accountant or CFO with you, right? Because they are the ones who know your payroll, they know what your expenses have been, they know the situation you're in on employees, and then make the best decision. But if it does come down to maybe one for working capital and one for payroll and other expenses, that may be okay too. So the good news is you can apply for both. And then let me look to see what else is on here for questions. So that I think is now finally straightforward. Okay, so here's a question, and I think this is a little bit of, you know, let's say right now, we thought just a week ago, right, that maybe there was hope that we would have our restaurants open sooner, right? So we were really looking at maybe mid-April, and now we're looking at maybe early May. But if some of the, as Senator Cornyn talked about, these curves don't start to slow down a little bit in places like North Texas, where I am, what happens if this goes until the end of May or even early June, God forbid, that we don't have our dining rooms open and restaurants are not at full capacity? Would that be something that legislatively they would need to extend this program, or would the lenders be able to extend the program out further than that June 30th date? So if we just sort of keep going down this path.
Yeah, as far as extending the date at this point, I mean, that's something that would have to, from a the legislators would have to determine that, you know. So right now they've got, you know, the June 30th deadline on this, but, you know, I think that it's just really going to depend. I think that's just going to be a moving target until we actually know when they can really reopen. So I don't think that we can determine that at our level right now. I think that we just got to, you know, make sure that we continue to do things like this and communicate really what the issues are. And as long as we have this open communication, and the senator is obviously listening and totally engaged, and that we are communicating with him in his office to, you know, communicate the problems up, you know, Excellent. They'll do what needs to be done.
And so we've got one from John that says, does this cover all types of businesses, not just restaurants? And my understanding is yes, this is for small business. Yes. So as long as you meet that, I think where we were really beneficial is the carve out for restaurants, caterers, food service, and hotels, which really was about looking at the number of employees and how many locations we tend to have. But if you are in that retail and you qualify as a small business, and this is definitely the conversation you want to be in. Yes. And then it looks like someone just posted, Christy posted, it looks like the loans for payroll have changed from yesterday until today. And so the only thing I can comment on is that we understood in the guidance that the PPP would be a 10-year repayment period with no a repayment penalty for early payment. And what we're seeing is that it's actually 2 years. And you had mentioned 2 years as well. And so do you know if that was sort of a change that was made, or on the PPP, it's definitely, you've got to pay it back in 2 years?
That was a change that was made because we had that same question internally, but then when it came out yesterday, it was a 2-year term. So evidently there must have been something that we haven't received any guidance in terms of really what happened on that. But what we have here is that it is a 2-year term. So somehow when they went in there and make the decisions,
this is where we're at. So 2 years good and final. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Just so we have that answer now.
Today.
Go ahead. Today. Yeah. There's never in my life, I started as a college professor, but where you just wish you had the answer, and it's such a moving target. I wish people could understand when we just don't know. It's because it's just unclear. What SBA program is available for working capital? And I think this is what we just talked about. And I think your advice is so good, which is you may use economic injury if you want to pay that off over a much longer period of time, right? Up to 30 years. And then you may want to use the PPP for your payroll, your mortgage, your rent, because there is going to be that portion of the covered period that you will not have to repay. And so would that be sort of your advice? I think it's more financial advice, but since this is your...
I think they have to take a look at, their situation. Everybody's situation is totally different. Yes. The other thing is that right now, the payroll came out, the economic injury was first, but we also, depending on when they start processing that economic injury disaster loan, what we don't know is if there's a duplication in there. Because with any type of federal program, you can't really have like the duplication of benefits. For example, when they're doing the application, it asks on there, have you received any other compensation from any other source? Yes. So whether that was business interruption insurance or whether that was some other program. So under normal circumstances, when you apply for an economic injury, let's say that you had eligibility for $50,000, but then you actually received $10,000 from your business interruption insurance. So that would be $10,000, then, that maybe be reduced. And so maybe your eligibility would be $40,000. But notice in both of the applications, whether it's the payroll protection or the economic injury, it's asking, did you receive any other type of federal assistance or any other type of assistance? So I don't know if down the line, if let's say that your total eligibility for an economic injury would have been $75,000, but you went ahead and you got the payroll and maybe you needed $20,000. And does that difference deducted so your eligibility would really be $55,000? So you're not having just loans and all of this, but that's just something to kind of think about when you're, I think with either program, they're not trying to have you duplicate, that we have duplication, because there are federal dollars. So that's just something to think about here too as well.
That's a great point. And I think Keith asked, what happens if Governor Abbott-Keith is closed, right? So if in the name of public safety, dining rooms need to remain closed until we get past this other side of the curve. And I think that's where I believe from even Senator Cornyn, right? I mean, he is so engaged with our sector and knows the pain that's happening across. I think you've seen some of the projections are just wild with the number of restaurants that are currently closed or may continue to close. And so I would fully expect, as we've received this support, that if this was something that lingered on, and let's just, gosh, hope it doesn't, into the summer, I believe you would see these programs continue because the pain would only be pushed further out. And so I think that's probably, I wouldn't worry about that today. I think, as we're thinking, we have about 5 minutes left, Elsie, so we may want to answer 1 or 2 more questions. But I think that probably the best advice is your SBA office that is closest to you to have that relationship with, and really sitting down with your lender now. And because we have many members coming back now, various banks, they have their documents, the application process is pretty straightforward. But if you can have that financial conversation with your accountant and CFO and sit down with your lender and look at all the options that are available to you and make the best decision you can, I think as even the last 72 hours, we've gotten much more clarity about what these programs are and how you can benefit from them. And so Yeah, someone's commenting about the SBA website. I see the economic injury loan application, but not the disaster loan application. You need to go to your lender to find the disaster loan application, correct? Because it's going through your bank. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, the payroll protection is what's bank. The economic injury disaster loan, which is the EIDL, EIDL, that is on the SBA website. So if it's a disaster, economic injury disaster, that is on the SBA website.
Yep, and so Adam, it's just clarity of terms. And so that first part of the first act that came out, that is up there, that comes through the SBA as 30 years. And then what you're talking about, I think, is the PPP, which is under the CARES Act, and that's where you have to go to your lender and they'll have the documents for you. And as I said, they're all going to be out tomorrow and they can start processing, but many of them have them as of yesterday. So make sure you get to your lender. Oh, and then, okay, this isn't the next one. This came up a lot, and this is from Bradford. If calculating payroll, do tips claimed count? So if I'm a business and reported last year, say $500,000 in tipped wages, do I add that into my payroll calculation when I'm determining how much I can pull a loan for?
That I do not know. And on the, that I do not know. And on the actual worksheet here, I didn't really see anything on there about that, but that's a good question. So I can put that forward and see if we get any guidance on that, but
Perfect.
We didn't have any tips.
That one, and then here's one last one. And then anything else, as we've always done on these webinars, we will capture all these questions. Anna, who I want to personally thank on our team, who is the Chief Revenue Innovation Officer who helped set this up for us and has just done great on these webinars. She captures all these questions. So we can even work with Elsie or up in the team in DC to get this information for you, or she just texted, she's the Chief Webinar Officer as well. But one of the things that a lot of people have asked, and I've got a document on my desk, is to not forget about some of the other benefits under SBA. And so one of the questions that has come up a lot is there any kind of loan forgiveness or assistance for people that currently have an SBA loan? And my understanding is there is. And so if I already have a loan and I'm having difficulty paying on that loan with the SBA, is there any kind of relief because we're in this sort of, unprecedented crisis?
Okay, two things. If they already have an SBA loan, there is under the new CARES Act a debt release act, so that where for the next 6 months your SBA loan payment, that is basically waived, or SBA was making that payment to the lender, and that's actually on our website. So if you got an SBA loan, then you would contact your lender about that, and SBA will make the payment, is essentially making the payments on that to the lender, and that is on the website. And I actually sent out some guidance. Those lenders are going to be getting guidance on that this week, but that is on our SBA website.
Excellent. Well, that helps, right? So if you already have a loan payment you can't make and you need to borrow some money to try to stay alive, I mean, that's very generous. So,
and that's on the direct 7A loans. I think on your questionnaire there was a question about whether or not that applied to anyone who had an SBA disaster loan, a previous SBA disaster loan. I don't have the answer on that as far as a previous SBA loan, but on that SBA direct loan, or the loan that came from your lender, those are the ones that SBA is going to make the payments to the lender on that, on behalf of the borrower. The borrower would just need to contact their bank and ask for that.
Perfect. And on the previous disaster, I know we're waiting for that answer too, right? So we think a lot about our Houston restaurants and that whole part of Texas that have just come through that major hurricane, and many of them are still, you've just started to rebuild or in that process. And so that's a big population of people too. So we'll come back to all of you with that information. And Elsie, any closing comments or advice?
We want to help, make application if you haven't made application. And we'll try to get your questions answered. The 800 number is out there. I know it's kind of busy, but if the district offices are there to kind of help answer any questions wherever everybody's calling from, but there is a district office in your region. We cover 72 counties here in Northeast, Central, East Texas. So we'll try to help as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, because I know you're dealing with a ton of new stuff yourself in the SBA, but also with a lot of our members who are in tremendous pain. And so I just really appreciate taking the time to help us. And we will keep, as the Restaurant Association, funneling everything we can to them, and we'll keep gathering as many questions and getting it back out. But it feels even today, like now that we're almost at the peak where processing will start and more clarity is coming out. And then we have someone like Senator Cornyn who's at the table making sure that the intent, right, that we expected out of this, that clarity will be brought to us. So I just want to thank you again on behalf. Thank Anna for making this happen. Thank everyone for listening. We will post this in the next hour, so if you want to go back, especially on the resources site, and post a lot of materials we received today. And the commitment is we also will go back on this Q&A and get as much information as you can, because in some cases we're finding ourselves as we're moving through this. So thanks everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Elsie.
All right.